Hey, welcome back to All Things Baseball Podcast, episode 23. Before we start today, make sure you go grab merch in the link in the description below. We have shirts and beanies.
Is there some sort of a link tree?
Yes, you can go grab it. They're still available in the link tree below.
Okay.
We had a great discussion today with Mr. Jack Cowart, Alabama Sports Commentator. We talked about player development and the top prospects of today in the game.
We did. He did a great job, a lot of research. And for our viewers, we've kind of changed our format this year for 2025. So in August through December of last year, when we started this podcast in August, lots of great topics, greatest baseball players of all time. We followed the World Series, Little League World Series, movies, lots of great topics. But this year, we really want the podcast, which we're doing every other week now, we want to focus on scouting. And in today's podcast is going to be on the top prospects, but future ones will also be on player development. So we're taking this format because we feel like we've got some great guests to share with you, some players that we're going to interview, which we haven't done before, and some great coaches and some great trainers for player development. So I think that the new format is going to be great. And well, yeah.
So short form and long form, right?
We're still going to, when there's a topic that comes up, like say there's a Hall of Fame vote, or a player, an event happens, or someone dies, an older player.
Manfred says sticky substances is in.
Right. New rules changes. What we'll do is we'll jump on a podcast when that event happens for 10 minutes. And so you'll still get our opinions on some of the latest all things baseball events that are going on in the world of baseball. So you'll still get that. But the long form is going to be every other week with the scouting and player development. So I think you're going to like the new format. It's going to be great. And I will tell you that, be forewarned, when we get into the scouting and the player development, there's going to be so much to digest with, different metrics, the different tools like TrackMan and DiamondCast and Blast Motion and Rapsodo. And I mean,
what matters and what doesn't, right?
What matters and what doesn't. We're going to delve into all of it. And I think it's going to be really interesting because you know me, I am a purist. Fred Chicken Stanley did not need any of these metrics to tell me that if I needed to advance a runner in 1976, that Fred Chicken Stanley was my man.
He was the GOAT.
He was the GOAT, if you know who he is. But my point is, we're still going to try to figure out how all these metrics help determine if a player can make the World Series or the major leagues, and then eventually the World Series.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So it's going to be a fun season leading up into the draft. We're going to have a lot to talk about.
Well, with that, let's get into it with Jack Cowart.
Let's get into it. Okay, so now we want to take a look at really the best MLB prospects, professional prospects out there, okay? We'll focus on kind of the macro, the whole country, but really we want to spend more time on the Southeast and Alabama where we live. And to do that, we've asked our good friend, Jack Cowart. He's Johnny's good friend. He is our Alabama Sports Commentator. And welcome to the podcast, Jack Cowart.
Welcome, Jack.
Hey. Thank you, Johns. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Nothing better than talking baseball with your buddies. Right. Hopefully we can impart some wisdom on our viewers and entertain them a little bit as well.
Absolutely. So, we appreciate you coming on because we know you've done some research here. And, our scouting and player development podcast, we're not expecting anybody to look at us and say, oh, they're experts in scouting, but there are so many resources for scouting. And so we've done a lot of research. You've done research. Tell us about the top players that you've researched and kind of a little bit about the metrics that maybe have gone along to call these guys the top prospects in multiple scouting bureaus.
Right. So I have found I've identified a few players that are going to be factors in the 2025 MLB draft when it comes around this summer.
Right.
And there are some advanced metrics that I tend to focus on, and as sabermetrics grow in popularity, I know you say that we're not experts, but what's kind of beautiful about baseball now is all this information is so readily available to the public that
Right.
if anybody looks long enough, they can become experts. I mean, it just depends on the amount of time you spend.
Well, yeah, and for sure, and we're going to have strong opinions. I would say that because, like you said, there's so much data with these players these days that if you're following the data and then you're looking at, obviously, if you know how to look at video of the swings and their pitching and all that stuff, you can come to some conclusions that are similar to maybe what some of the bureaus are projecting, and then maybe some things that are, maybe, we got somebody to watch, maybe a sleeper,
right.
So who were some of the top prospects, and what are the features that you saw that they,
Well, the first one I want to talk about is Jace Lavalette. Now, this guy is a outfielder at Texas A&M. He's going into his junior season, so he is draft eligible.
Right.
He's 6'6", 230 pounds, coming out of Obra D. Tompkins High School in Katy, Texas. He was the 113th overall prospect coming out of high school, according to Perfect Game. Now, a stat that I found interesting about him. Now, it's different for every player. Some metrics are more conducive to certain player types. With him, he's primarily a power hitter, but he actually out-homered last year's 12th overall pick, Braden Montgomery, when they were both at Texas A&M last year. So that's a pretty interesting stat to me. Now, he does have speed, but his steals dropped significantly from 2023 to 2024. 2023, he had 18. 2024, it dropped down to 7. And with his big frame, 6'6", 230, I really don't expect speed to be necessarily a part of his game.
Right.
He plays center field at Texas A&M. He played center field most games last year. He'll probably end up in a corner outfield spot. But he has a good eye at the plate. But he does swing and miss occasionally, and you tend to see that with prospects that have high power potential.
For sure.
I mean, they take big swings. Sometimes they miss, but when he connects, I mean, he's got the type of power to send it to Mars.
A little bit like an Aaron Judge archetype, would you say?
Big
Man,
guys.
he's definitely size-wise, he's similar. It's tough comparing him to a future Hall of Famer. I'm always hesitant to compare.
I guess in terms of just like stature, maybe.
Yeah, no, in terms of stature, they're both outfielders. They both have extraordinary power. I mean, Aaron Judge has a good eye at the plate, but he also tends to strike out a pretty decent bit. But it doesn't really detract from what he's able to do.
And that's a good point, Jack, because there are a lot of guys that they have a plus tool like power, which we'll talk a lot about in the scouting and player development segment. If you have a plus tool like power, the scouts, they love you, right? If you're 6'6", 230, you're hitting bombs and you have unreal power. Like you said, though, if he's got a good batting eye, and the metrics prove that, they have a lot of different tools to see. Ways to show, what the batting eye is, like, walks to strikeouts, or things like that. So tell me, when you said he has a good batting eye, was there some metrics that necessarily pointed to that because he walked a lot, or what made you say that?
He did. He took a lot of walks. I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, but
you saw that stood out.
Yeah, no. His walks were comparable. I mean, I think he had a few more strikeouts than he did walks, but
Right.
His walks were up there. I mean, last year his on base percentage. It's not precise, but it was about like 450. So,
okay.
roughly 45% of the time he was getting on base.
Okay. And that projects well. All right. Give us somebody else. Who else you got?
All right. The second guy I got here is Ethan Holiday. I thought I'd throw in possibly the biggest prospect in baseball right now in terms of
You know what? Let's talk about him. We're here on a scouting, player development podcast. Let's talk about the number one consensus, right? I mean, he's pretty much the consensus. Yeah. All the different scouting bureaus. Let's talk about why he is the number one prospect.
Right. He actually, at this point, I think has more hype than Jackson Holiday did at the same point in both of their careers, which is it's pretty incredible considering, I mean, Jackson Holiday was incredibly hyped. Jackson Holiday is only 6'1", 180. But Ethan Holiday is 6'4", 200 pounds. So he has a more similar build to their father, Matt Holiday, the longtime big leaguer, than Jackson did. He's currently he plays shortstop at Stillwater High School. He plays a good field, but with his size, odds are he's probably more suited for third base, especially because he has a strong arm. He's committed to Oklahoma State right now, but I mean, most likely he's going to be drafted in the top 3 picks, if not 1. So his odds.
Yeah, that's a formality.
You're
going to get $10 million to sign at 18. You're not going to college. Sorry.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen while you're in college. You could drop down to a much lower pick.
Right. I mean, or you could get injured.
So obviously size, that's good. I mean, what's he like? What can you tell me? Do you have any stats? And if you don't have high school stats, are hard to get. We're telling our viewers and listeners they're very hard to get. So Johnny and I talked about that offline. But besides size and power, which there's going to be other guys in the draft in the later rounds that are 6'4", 200, 210. What else stands out about this guy and the pedigree? About him, like, does he have some insane, exit velocity, hard contact rate? Like, what can you tell us?
Yeah, hard contact rate's actually pretty hard to find among high schoolers, but his exit velocity numbers are good. Like his max exit velocity right now, last I checked, it was well over 105, which for somebody who's 17 years old is,
that's,
and with that kind of frame, it's going to get higher.
Yeah, definitely. For those who don't know, just to jump in, for those who don't know, an exit velocity, the D1 colleges are looking for, seniors coming out of high school with 90. And then obviously if you're going pro and you're 17 and you're already over 100 and 105, that's elite. There's very few guys in the country that would probably be.
In terms of exit velocity, the most the stat that's helped me with it the most is it's called hard hit percentage, and it kind of goes along with exit velocity. So what's considered a hard hit ball is a ball that's hit over 95 miles an hour. Right. Now, 95 miles an hour in exit velocity, you can pull it up online. There's a chart which shows how exit velocity correlates to slugging percentage and average. And once you start getting above 95 miles an hour on exit velocity, that's when the numbers really start to tick up. So, I mean, it's not foolproof. You can get doubles hitting 90, 91, but 95 mile an hour exit velocity is kind of the benchmark that I use to consider a ball is hard hit. And I guess the sabermetrics industry in general, I mean, that's what they use.
Right. Okay. So he has that. Who else you got? Give us.
Yeah, I got Cam Canella, which he's a little bit different of a prospect. He's not, a high power. He's not necessarily a power hitter. He's more of a doubles over home runs. Although.
And where's he from?
Well, yeah, let me introduce him first. But he plays outfield at Clemson. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. He was a little bit lower coming out of high school than some of these other prospects. He was the 500th rated prospect coming out of Hartsville, South Carolina, according to Perfect Game. he's possibly the best pure hitter in college right now. If you go look, I don't have the numbers in front of me again, but he was hitting in the high 300s last year at Clemson. It was like 360, 370.
Right.
And he had 16 doubles and 11 home runs, which 11 home runs in college is, that's not by any means. He doesn't have no power. He's not like I'm trying to think of a good comp in terms of, he's not a Luis Ariz. He's got more power than that. Maybe, but he has the potential to have that kind of contact ability. He rarely swings and misses. He's a great fielder. He could stick in center field. And he plays at Clemson. So I'm excited to watch him this season. I have a feeling that, some of those doubles could turn to home runs as he continues to put on a little bit more muscle. But yeah, I'm really interested in him as a prospect.
So you said he could also be a center fielder. What does his speed look like?
He has plus speed.
Plus speed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact feet per second, but most scouting services have his speed at around 50 to 60 or 50 to 55, roughly.
Okay. So probably like 6'7" to 6'9" kind of speed.
Yeah. Which I mean, I should have pulled that number from the website to bring it on, but.
Right, and for anybody listening,
when you say plus speed, if you noticed that he had plus speed, then that's obviously good enough. Okay.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, by the way, what Jack had mentioned, the 50 to 55 scale is based on a major league scale that they go. I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 40 to 70,
40 to 80,
40 to 80. 80 is
yeah.
And nobody gets any.
50 to 55 is above average for a major league.
Yeah.
Which is good. You want to be anywhere between that and 60, and anything above that's cheddar.
Right. Once you get into the 70s and 80s, that's elite. Like,
right. I was 70s across the board in 1983. Nobody really. That's because I wrote it. I wrote it in the scouting report, but nobody else.
Yeah, you scouted yourself.
I scouted myself. I gave myself 70s.
You were a little bit biased.
Yeah, I was a little bit biased. Okay. Did you have now? How do we want? Johnny and I talked offline, and I think we mentioned this to you before we jumped on, that one of the phenomenons that we found fascinating is the two-way player. And there was Babe Ruth, and then all of a sudden it's like Shohei Ohtani. And the irony is that every high school, their best pitcher was probably their best hitter, best player. So there's a lot of guys who say that they're two-way players, and they probably in high school they're two-way players. But to project as a major league two-way player is a totally different animal. As we see, there's only one Shohei Ohtani. So my question to you is, are the scouts looking at anybody out there who could project and play or pitch and hit?
Yeah. As you said, coming out of high school, there's a lot of players that list themselves as two-way players. I'm not sure if they do it or the scouting services, but they do play both positions in high school. But as you get higher up in the ranks, of course, it gets more difficult as the competition increases. And generally, they are usually better at one versus the other. And whichever team drafts them prefers to have them focus on one or the other. But there is a guy right now that I have been looking at, and he, in my opinion, has the best chance at maintaining both a pitcher and a hitter. His name is Cruz Schoolcraft, which that's a
phenomenal name.
It's a phenomenal name.
It's a phenomenal baseball name.
Yeah. He's 6'8", 230 pounds. He plays first base, and he's a left-handed pitcher out of Sunset High School in Oregon. Yeah, he's a big guy. He's only 17 too, which I mean, 6'8" at 17. I mean, who knows? I mean, he could add another inch or another 20 pounds. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. But
so he's a lefty. How hard does he throw?
He can touch 97 with his fastball.
Okay, so lefty who throws 97.
Yeah.
He's definitely a strong major league prospect as a pitcher. So tell me about his hitting, where someone wouldn't scrap the idea of him. The reason why I say this is,
Right.
Josh Hamilton, when he came out of high school, he was drafted once. Everybody knows the Josh Hamilton
Oh, yeah.
story, probably. But the scout that scouted him said he was the best high school prospect he had ever seen. And he could throw 96, 97. And obviously he hit, lots of home runs and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, but they made him a pure hitter. So
Right.
tell me about this guy's hitting.
So as a hitter, he has massive power upside. Currently, his power isn't necessarily as big as it could be in the future. But
Right.
when reading about him on Baseball America's scouts thought that he could progress into like a 70 grade power hitter, which is
Wow.
absolutely elite. If he can progress into a 70 grade power hitter and maintain his 97, topping mid 90s fastball from the left side, I
Right.
mean, he could end up forcing whoever drafts him's hand. I mean, if he's
Right.
that valuable on either side of the ball. He's also a plus fielder. He's a really good fielder at first base.
Right.
At 6'8", he's good at stretching out for balls. He's got long reach, quick hands.
Right.
Yeah. So, but you know, if they were going to limit him to one right now, I think his pitching's a little bit ahead of his hitting, but he has the upside on the hitting front to
Okay.
where if I had to choose somebody that could possibly develop into a two-way player in the MLB, Cruz Schoolcraft would be my choice.
Cruz Schoolcraft.
What a
All
name.
right. Great work, Jack. So that is, I think, a unique perspective looking at two-way players. I don't know any podcast in the country that is looking for two-way players like us. So way to go. And we'll have to follow up and see how Mr. Schoolcraft is Master Schoolcraft is doing.
Yeah.
All right. So from all these prospects that you're looking at, Baseball America and PBR and Perfect Game and all that stuff, they all have metrics. We've talked about it earlier in the intro. Is there a metric that seems to be more important than another? Let's talk hitting first, because this is such a power game these days. But
Right.
there's lots of power stats. There's lots of ways to measure power. Like, we talked a little bit about exit velocity. Is there a metric or something that's on the rise for measuring, prospects?
For prospects, yeah, actually, BABIP is a stat that I've been paying close attention to when evaluating players. That's batting average of balls in play. Right. So it's really good at telling you whether somebody is overperforming or underperforming. Now,
Right.
an average BABIP is generally around 300. Well, so if you see a number that's way above that, if somebody's BABIP is sitting around 400, odds are it means they're overperforming. Because
do they calculate that in college? I know they don't do it in high school. I mean,
now
I guess
they
could.
will. Yes, they do in college. I
Right.
mean, they'll talk about it on broadcasts and
They will
during
Okay.
the MLB draft scouting process.
They will. Okay.
That's a stat they mention, but that's also a stat that you kind of want to cross reference with hard hit percentage, because
Right.
obviously somebody's BABIP is going to be higher if they hit the ball harder. Because if you hit the ball
Right.
harder, you have a higher chance of, for the most part, the ball being a base hit, a single, double, triple, home run,
Gotcha.
so on and so forth. So you
All
want
right,
to see.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you want to see, how often the balls in play are dropping for hits, but you
Right.
also want to see if how hard they're hitting it correlates with how often they're getting hits. I think
Makes sense.
that's a pretty solid metric for evaluating talent.
We gotta check that out going forward. All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about any of the, since we live in Alabama, specifically Huntsville, are there any prospects that you see that are being projected for the early rounds that are from Alabama?
Yeah, so the number one prospect in Alabama right now, he has the chance. He's not on the top 100 prospects in the. Well, it depends on the site. If you look
Right.
at, I've seen him ranked as high as in the top 50 nationally in terms of prospects. His name is Caleb Barnett. He plays at Mountain Brook High School. Um,
Right.
he's 6'6", 220 pounds, and he's a two-way player. I mean, as of right now, he's listed as one, a third baseman and a
Right.
right-handed pitcher.
Right.
Do I think that he has the chance to remain that? No, probably not. He has such easy right-handed power that he'll probably most likely be doing his work primarily from a hitting perspective, and he plays. He's a really smooth third baseman. Um,
Right.
he handles balls well at the hot corner, but he does show glimmers of he doesn't have extreme velocity. His fastball sits at around 90, which in today's day and age is Jacob DeGrom throws a 93-mile-an-hour slider, which
Right.
So he's not going to blow you away with velocity, but his fastball does have a really high spin rate. He gets like 2,400 revolutions per minute on his fastball.
Okay, that's like major league level. I mean,
Right.
that's an average major league
It's
level,
even,
but that's
yeah,
major league level.
it's, and what the spin rate does, especially on those fastballs, is whenever you have the higher spin on the fastball, it gives the rising effect.
Rise,
So the hitters are expecting it to drop a little bit
the
as it gets
carry of
closer
the
to the
rise,
plate.
right?
Yep.
And
Lower
his
spin rate
fastball
is drop. Yeah.
and his fastball has just a ton of life to it.
So Caleb Burnett, 6'6", 220. Exit velocity looked like he was over 102.
Yeah.
Not a fast runner, though. He was a 7.4,
No.
960. I looked that up.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he looks like he can grow into that body, too.
Yeah.
And definitely some solid metrics on him. Okay. Anybody else stand out? We can move on to something else. But that's the guy you like for the maybe the second or third round?
Yeah, I could see that. Now, it wouldn't shock me if he ended up honoring his commitment to Alabama.
Right.
With the class that Alabama's got coming in and him being projected in the second or third, if he doesn't get the money amount that he wants, it wouldn't shock me to see him go to Alabama for 3 years.
Okay.
But if he does decide to go into the draft, the second or third round, I could see him going in that range.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, out of these prospects that you've talked about so far, if you had to say, like, seeing these guys and seeing their metrics just from an outsider looking in, what kind of makes up, like, based on physical, we can't really talk about mental attribute, but like, if you had to like look at them and say that could be a major league player, with some polishing, tuning up, like they just look like they could be ready pretty quick.
Now, okay, some of the primary things I look for when I'm looking at players and thinking, whether I'm high on them or not. So the raw characteristics, I want them to be able. Usually, you're looking for guys with bigger frames because they have more room to grow. Muscle wise, they can add on muscle. They're generally more projectable. I look at I might be an outsider on this, but I still look at the walk percentage. I look at how good their eye is because that's important to me. Because if you're striking out, at a 30% rate, it's a lot harder for you to be an effective player. If you're striking out 30% of the time.
Definitely. It's hard to project you as a major leaguer if in the lower ranks you're striking out a lot.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you're not walking too, the combination of the two. Because if you're striking out a lot and you're not walking, that's that
Right.
makes it a lot harder to project. Then you're looking at who's the guy that we heard the chant in left field, Johnny? Joey Gallo. Yeah.
Oh Lord.
Then you're projecting a Joey Gallo who has
Talk about
unreal power.
yeah.
But I mean,
I mean,
listen, he's played them. I don't know how they've carried him in the major leagues for as long as they have, but that guy has incredible power. But I mean,
consistently
you
hits
and I can pitch
190.
to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean,
but the reason, I think that's a good point. Good question, John, and it's a good point about that because I think personally, if you look at a hitter's walks to strikeouts ratio, and we and you guys have a friend, Justin Foscue, who is, got a cup of coffee with the Rangers this year or
yeah.
last year, and I think his biggest attribute as a hitter. I'm not even going to say the power. He's got good power for an infielder, second baseman. Although I think they're going to move him to first with Nate Lowe leaving. But boy, if you look at his last 2 full seasons in the minor leagues, he has more walks to strikeouts and power
Right.
numbers. So what it screams of to me, and nobody with the Rangers has called me yet, is
Yeah.
that
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not
is that he needs at bats at the major league level.
Oh yeah.
If you got a guy in the AAA that is walking more than he's striking out, and he's hitting home runs, and he's got a decent, on base, a good on base percentage.
Yeah.
To me, guys like that are rare. I did a
Yeah.
deeper dive recently into how many Hall of Famers had career more walks to strikeouts, excuse me. And it's a very, very small number. You're talking about like the Stan Musials and the Ted Williams
Right.
and the players like that. Like most of your, like Reggie Jackson, I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
He struck out
But
way more
typically
than he
with
walked.
Justin is what's just tough is he would the last 2 years he's been in the worst situation for a prospect to be in. He's just completely blocked. He has nowhere to go. They can't even give him at bats because you got Seager and Simeon and you got Josh Young at third base. You've had Nate Lowe at first. He really
Well, now
can't
you don't
play
have
the
Nate Lowe.
outfield.
Now you don't have Nate Lowe, so I'm
Right,
hoping
right.
that
So he
gets-
should get a little bit more run this year, but I'm right there
Yeah.
with you. I mean, it's tough for anybody to get into a groove when they're only getting 20 at bats and then sent back down again. You
Yeah.
got to give him a little bit of a leash.
Yeah,
But
for
he's
sure.
shown at the minors that he has the ability to hit quality
Yeah,
pitching.
that walks to strikeouts thing is like you said, it's a big one. And if you can
Yeah.
show that you got a good batting eye and that you put the BABIP, that the balls
Yeah.
in play. If you have those types of numbers and hard hit rates and stuff like that, then your luck's going to change and you're going to get more hits.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to
Just
figure out.
Last
major
point
league
on that,
Yeah.
the walk to strikeout percentage you can look at when evaluating pitchers and hitters. So a pitcher, obviously you want them to have a higher strike to walk percentage,
Right.
because the MLB is prioritizing strikeout rates, strikeout
Right.
ability these days. You want a guy who can strike
sure.
out, a batter an inning. So,
Absolutely.
but then when you're looking at it from a hitter's perspective, you want it to be the exact opposite. You want his K to walk percentage to be, as low as you possibly can. It shows that, he walks out and strikes at a much closer rate
Right.
rather than some large discrepancy.
Absolutely. So on this podcast, we're really just starting off with this first scouting and player
Right.
development podcast. So we're going to definitely take deeper dives in the future. Before we go, how does the Southeast compare to the rest of the country? Are there some top prospects? You mentioned the Clemson guy. Obviously, we talked about a high school guy. I mean, it just seems like every year there's a lot of Texas and California and
Right.
does the Southeast show well this year? Do you think the draft will be littered with a lot of guys from the
I do.
Southeast in the top end
Yeah.
of the draft?
There's actually one more player that is a little bit of a sleeper from the Southeast.
I was going to ask about sleeper. Good.
Yeah, that I kind of wanted to highlight. His
Okay.
name's Colton Smith. He's a pitcher at Georgia.
Okay.
He's 6'3", 210 pounds. The 212th rated prospect coming out of Forest High School in Ocala, Florida, according to Perfect Game. Now, if you look at the surface level, if you looked at his numbers from last year, his ERA was high, like close to 5, which that's a big number. A 5 ERA is pretty terrible. But if you actually drill down into it, the thing that really tipped me off about him and got me excited about him as a prospect was his K to walk percentage or ratio. He had 105 strikeouts to 20 walks in 69.2 innings. Right, so he's striking out 1.5 batters an inning, and he only walked 20 batters over almost 70 innings. So the control is there. The stuff is good. If he's creating this many swings and misses and strikeouts. And he's got 4 good pitches. His cutter is actually his best pitch, and some scouts are saying that it's the best cutter in the draft this next year. Nice. He generated a 43% swing and miss last year on the cutter. So about half the time he threw that cutter, it was a swing and a miss, which, that's pretty incredible.
That's a major number. That'll stand out for sure.
Yeah,
okay,
so he's a little bit lower in the rankings right now, but it would not shock me at all if he tears it up at Georgia this year. And when it gets close to draft time, we see him going, high in the first round. It wouldn't shock me.
And what's the name?
Okay.
Colton Smith.
Colton Smith.
Yep.
Colton Smith. Okay.
Sleeper.
All right. And sleeper. Okay. We're gonna wind it up here. It's good analysis, Jack. Thanks for the research that you've done.
Thank you.
We're going to continue to do it. We're going to ask you to come back.
Thank you for having me on.
Another time. Because I think, for me, because people can't look at all the scouting bureaus and Baseball America and PBR and Perfect Game and go to the huddle sites and look at videos. But if we're doing this stuff and then coming up with analysis, I think that we're going to add, a lot of value.
Yeah.
Also, for those of you who are prospects, you or your parents can go to haystack.com, and for just $30 a month, you use the promo code, which will be in the description. You can get access to 54,000 colleges, coaches and colleges. What's that?
What's the code?
I don't have it on it's in the description.
We'll put it down.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description. But
Correct.
you can get
merch.
off. Yep, and then also in the description will be our merch, so you can get beanie and a shirt, and follow us along as we continue to dive into the scouting and player development. We're going to have a lot more people on talking about this stuff. We're going to have Jack back. We're going to get deeper dives into this as we get closer to the season, the high school and college season, and closer to the draft, right? When's the draft, Jack?
I don't have an exact date, but it's All-Star break weekend.
All-Star break weekend. Yeah. All right. So we've got some time to build towards that. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
All right.
See ya.